talking about the season opener that we had last night. NFL football returns. They're actually playing games. There were fans in the stadium. Far fewer fans than normal, but actually there were quite a few fans. I guess they were social distanced, and I couldn't really tell, the masks that they were wearing. But what was more interesting to me was really not what was going on the field during the game, right? And you had the defending Super Bowl champs, Kansas City Chiefs, hosted the Texas Titans, beat them. But the action on the field, to me, was secondary to the action that took place on the field before the kickoff. And that was this unity, right? Where you have all of these NFL players, just like, the NBA players, they need to show their fans and the world that they stand with Black Lives Matter, right? And they stand with George Floyd. And, actually, I'm glad they didn't actually come out with any posters with pictures of George Floyd or anything. His name wasn't part of the protest. But what they were doing is they were all standing together before the game to signify their support for racial equality, racial justice, and to acknowledge all the racial injustice, right? To acknowledge this systemic racism that we now all agree, right? Or not all of us, but a lot of us now agree is not only real, but is the reason that there are so many problems in the African American community. It's all because of racism. And so the NFL players, they want to get together and they want to show their support because they think in so doing, they will help push America to doing what's right and finally tackling this systemic racism, acknowledging it, atoning for the sins, doing something about it. I don't know, reparations, whatever. But this is how we can solve the problem. And of course, even these NFL players are demanding that the owners do more, spend more, whatever, to eradicate racism. And it really just bothers me to see all of these high-paid professional athletes, very highly paid professional athletes, many of them, African-American, complaining about racism, right? Obviously, racism didn't impede their success, right? Look at Patrick Mahomes, who is the quarterback of the Chiefs, he's half black, right? I think his dad is black and his mother is white, but, Obama was half black and he was black. So if you're half black, you're black, right? And he is about to become, I think, the highest paid NFL player in history. I think I heard that he's going to be doing a $500 million contract. $500 million contract to play football. Racism didn't prevent Patrick Mahomes from getting that contract. If Patrick Mahomes is smart, he will get a gold clause, right? Have a gold clause on his contract because we could have such massive inflation, around his contract that, it's still probably going to be a lot of money, but you never know. We could have hyperinflation and he's, playing for monopoly money. So he should really tie it to the price of gold. But clearly, the NFL is not racist, but that doesn't stop a lot of people from somehow claiming that the NFL is racist. And, one of the ways I hear people trying to claim that the NFL is racist is they point to the number of black head coaches in the NFL. And right now, there's 3. And there are 32 NFL teams. So a little under 10%. Was that 9.5%? Almost 10% of the coaches are black. All right. A little bit less than the 13% of the population that's black. If they hired one more coach, if there were 4, we'd pretty much be there. If there were 5 out of 32, now what's that, 15, 16%? You'd be overrepresented. But they'll say, no, but wait a minute. You can't look at it relative to the population. Look at the fact that 70% of the NFL players are black. So if 70% of the players are black, well, 70% of the coaches should be black. I guess that's their reasoning. Which, first of all, once you have to acknowledge that 70% of the players are black, right there, wait a minute. How can the NFL owners be a bunch of racists if 70% of the players on their teams are black? I mean, their racism isn't preventing them from hiring all these blacks. I mean, the people who should be complaining should be the white players or the Hispanic players or the Asian players. I mean, they're not getting hired, right? Why aren't they complaining? In fact, you've got all these guys in the NFL that are complaining about racism. Maybe we should boycott the games and say, you're right. We need the NFL to look like America. You have too many African American players. That's not right. There's obviously systemic racism in sports. After all, why else would there be 70% of the players black? I mean, it can't be for a logical reason, right? If there's a disparity, it must be the result of systemic racism. So yeah, we need to make the NFL look like America. Where are the female players? Where's the transgender players? Why aren't there any older players? I mean, there's age discrimination going on. Why are there no people in their 50s and 60s? What about people with handicaps? Why don't we have any handicap players? They're obviously discriminating against the disabled, right? I mean, you could make these arguments, but it's amazing that they want to say that the NFL is racist because we only have 10% of the head coaches are black. The skill set is completely different, right? What it takes to be a good coach is not necessarily what it takes to be a good player on the field, right? There's different skill sets, different abilities. And, even though 70% of the professional football players are black, it's a smaller percentage in college. I think, Division I, yeah, you got maybe 55% of the Division I players are black. But as you go to Division II, Division III, you have more and more white players, more and more Hispanic players. Certainly you go down to high school, right? So a lot of these guys who become coaches, they didn't play in the NFL. They weren't good enough to make it to the NFL. Some of them did, but a lot of them, played in college and then they went on to coaching. They didn't go on to the NFL, or they played in high school. And a lot of these coaches too, they work their way up. They can start in high school, then they can go to college, and they work their way up the ranks. But to say that the fact that only 10% of the coaches are black, that somehow proves that the owners are racists, how is that possible? How can they not be racist when it comes to hiring players, but they're racist when it comes to hiring coaches? The fact that there are 70% black players proves that they're not racist. See, the coaches want to win. I mean, is it possible that there's an owner, an NFL owner, who is a racist? Sure, it's possible. But what the owner of an NFL team cares more about than their racism is winning. They want to make money. And you make more money when you have a winning team, right? The better your record, the fans like going to games where the home team is winning, right? You can sell more merchandise when you have a good team. You get better TV spots. You get more money. Hey, you might make it into the playoffs. You get even more money, right? These are big, expensive teams, and these guys got big egos, right? You've got some very, very rich owners, right? And what do they want to do? They want to win. They want to beat the other rich owners on the field. This is their own version of war, right? So they don't care what color these players are. They want to win, right? And the same thing with coaches. They want to hire the best players for the job, and it just so happens that 70% of them are black, right? And it's a fair competition, right? The reason that blacks are winning these positions is because they're better than the players that they beat of whatever ethnicity they happen to be. The same applies to coaching. These NFL owners are looking to hire the best coach possible, and they're looking at all the coaches, and they're looking at their track records and where they've coached in the past and what kind of success they've had. They're trying to find a coach that's going to enable the team to win, right? They just spent all this money hiring all these expensive athletes. They're not going to blow the whole thing by hiring a second-rate coach just because he's white. They're not going to pass up this great coach who happens to be black and say, nah, I'm not going to hire you. You're black. I mean, I'm fine hiring black players, but come on, I draw the line at coaching. That is a bunch of nonsense, right? What it really proves is you can succeed if you're black as long as you're good, right? That's how you make it to the top. And the same thing would be true in every occupation and in every profession. People always want to hire the best, right? Are there some people who are racist? Yeah, sure. There's not that many though. They're, percentage wise. But even if they are, they're going to keep quiet, keep that to themselves if it costs them money, right? When the government comes in with these anti-discrimination laws and takes away the financial penalty for being a racist, well, then they incentivize racism. But in a free market, then racism is eradicated on its own. It's unfortunate because all these players now want to get together and demand that we put an end to racism, and we can't do that. There's going to be racists in society. What we want is to minimize the damage that racism does. But government not only does it minimize it, it maximizes it. And the problems that are plaguing the African American community that a lot of these players are rightfully concerned about. I'm not saying they're wrong to be upset about what's happening in African American communities. It's a disaster what's happening. It's a disgrace. We need to do something about it. But it's not because of racism. And all this Black Lives Matter, the problem that young black men have is they're getting gunned down by white racist cops. That is a bunch of nonsense. Yes, there are a lot of young black men who are getting gunned down, but they're being gunned down by other young black men. That is the reality. In fact, if you look at the leading cause of death for young black males in America, and these are, 18 to 40 in this area, it's homicide, right? More young blacks are killed by other people than are killed by themselves, than commit suicide or who die in accidents, right? Because when you're young, right, that's how you die. I mean, you're not dying of disease generally because the diseases don't start hitting you until you're older. So if you're a teenager, you're in your 20s and you die, an accident or, suicide is usually the top causes. But for young black males, it's murder. For young white males, it's much different. I think it's like 32% about of the young black males who die, it's a death by homicide. When it comes to white males, now you're at 3 or 4%. So a much lower percentage. So for young white men, you're, again, far more likely to kill yourself, drug overdose, whatever it is, or you die in an accident, car accident, or some type of, other event that happens and you end up dying. But for young black males, it's being murdered by other young black males. And of course, when you look at women, then, the numbers tank, right? So the problem isn't for black women, it's the males. And that's where the problem is. But it's not because of racism. Blacks aren't killing other blacks because of racism, right? But one of the reasons they are is because of the war on drugs. So why aren't these athletes demanding an end to the war on drugs? If they really care about what's happening in the inner cities and all the violence, how about ending the war on drugs? Because, drugs are winning, right? People are dying. Look at all the overdose deaths. I mean, reality is that's what killed George Floyd. They should be worried about all the drugs George Floyd was taking and the fact that he OD'd on drugs, right? Not about the policeman, but they're not going to talk about that. They're not going to talk about the failed welfare state, right? They're not going to talk about all these young black males growing up without fathers. Hey, why is that? Maybe this is one reason that they all turn to crime is because they don't have a father figure in the house. And why is that? Once upon a time before the welfare state, black children were more likely to grow up in intact families than white children. They had very strong families before the government welfare system destroyed the black family. And now you have all these out of wedlock births and you have all these young black males just growing up and they go to crime. And of course, we glamorize and glorify crime with the war on drugs by creating so much profits for the people that go into drugs. And then, of course, we build all these roadblocks for all legitimate avenues. We build in a minimum wage law. We build in occupational licensing laws. We make it so much harder for young black males to gain legitimate employment. We kind of, steer them. We corral them into drugs. I mean, we shut down all their other avenues, and the only one that's left is drugs. And of course, they see their friends, the ones that are dealing drugs, they have all the bling, they have the fancy cars, they get the prettier girls. And then we have the rap music that glorifies it. I mean, that's not what these guys are criticizing. There is so much they could do. What about the failed public schools? What about what we're doing to our African American kids in these horrible government schools that they're trapped in? Why aren't they asking for a voucher system, right? Why don't they are they demanding that we actually do something to help these kids get real educations, not being indoctrinated by these bureaucrats, but let them actually learn something? And how about more on-the-job training, more apprenticeships, get rid of all these laws, minimum wage laws again, or other laws that make it too expensive to hire these unskilled young men, and learn them, teach them some job skills. Let them learn on the job. Let them climb up the job ladder. No. We've destroyed all the bottom rungs on that job ladder. They have no chance of climbing on. The only job they're going to get is in drugs. So they can be doing so much good, right? These are athletes that are high-profile guys, well-respected in these communities, idolized. People look up to them. They're role models. And they want to pretend that all these problems are the result of racism. That's an excuse. That's the one way to make sure that the problems are never solved. If you just blame everything on racism and just accept the fact that you're a victim, there's always going to be racism. So you're always going to be a victim. Instead of taking responsibility for yourself and realizing, yeah, there might be some racism out there, but damn it, I'm going to overcome that. I'm just going to work twice as hard. I'm going to overcome those stereotypes and use that to your advantage, right? And these guys could be doing that. They could really be making a difference. And it's so frustrating to see them squander that opportunity just because it's easy, right? They're taking the easy way, right? It looks really good, right? Because these guys are making a ton of money. And I think it's so interesting that they want their owners to spend all this money. Well, how about if they cut your salaries, right? How about that? You guys got plenty of money, spend that, right? And you can use that to cover reparations because, obviously slavery didn't hurt you guys. But the easiest thing to do to make their fans think they care is to just stand with unity and just buy this narrative hook, line, and sinker. Oh, yeah, we stand with you. It's solidarity. How about show some guts? Right? And actually stand up to the false narrative and try to make a real positive difference by educating some of these people to understand the truth and accept the truth along with personal responsibility and hold these leaders, right? Politicians and the race baiters, the poverty pimps, shine a spotlight on them, right? They have that opportunity, but no, they blow it because it's more convenient. It's easier to be liked if you just take the low road and just pretend you care so much about all these injustices by standing together in the middle of a field and holding hands.